So you wanted to know how scientific knowledge like actually changes, not just grows well.
Yeah.
Get ready, because we're going deep into that today.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating topic.
We're using Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions as our main source for this deep dive.
Yeah, that's a classic.
It's not just a history lesson.
No?
We're going to go beyond dates and discoveries.
Yeah.
And like try to understand how these big aha moments in science actually happen.
Yeah, like how do we get to those?
And why this whole process of scientific revolution matters to all of us, even today.
It's like we're trying to understand not just the building, but how the architects were thinking when they built it.
Oh, I like that.
How the choices they made shaped the entire structure of science as we know it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
Let's jump in with one of Kuhn's most intriguing and maybe even like little controversial ideas.
Okay.
Normal science.
Right.
He argues that most day-to-day science isn't about like these big paradigm-shifting discoveries that everybody thinks about, but it's actually about solving puzzles within an existing framework.
That's right.
So like think of it kind of like working with a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Uh-huh.
You've got the box cover as a guide.
Okay.
You kind of know broadly how the pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But your job is to find like where each one goes. You're not inventing a new puzzle or anything.
Right. You're working within a given system.
So does that mean that scientists are just kind of puzzle masters instead of creative geniuses?
Well, not at all. I mean, even working within a framework like that requires immense ingenuity.
I guess that makes sense.
Take the discovery of the Higgs boson, for example. Physicists knew that this particle should exist based on the standard model of particle physics.
Okay, yeah, I remember hearing about that.
But actually finding it was a huge accomplishment. It required incredible technological advancements, problem solving, even if the outcome was somewhat expected.
I see. So it's like the satisfaction comes not from just finding the missing puzzle piece,
Yeah.
but how difficult that puzzle was to solve in the first place.
Exactly, and that's what Kuhn is getting at with this idea of normal science.
Okay.
It's the essential work of refining and testing our existing theories, even if it doesn't lead to those dramatic revolutions that everybody thinks about.
But speaking of those revolutions, they don't just come out of nowhere.
No, they don't.
To understand them, we have to unpack Kuhn's idea of paradigms.
Right.
I have to admit, this is one of those concepts that always makes my head spin a little bit.
I can see that.
It seems like Kuhn uses paradigm in a bunch of different ways.
He does, and that can be really confusing.
Yeah.
For our Deem Drive today.
Okay.
I think we should focus on what he calls paradigms as exemplars,
Okay.
which is basically a fancy way of saying successful examples from the past that become models for future work.
So instead of like a list of rules, it's more like having a concrete example to work from.
Yeah, think about it like learning a language.
Okay.
You don't just memorize grammar rules,
Right.
You learn by seeing and using language in real sentences and conversations.
Oh, so like absorbing examples of how it works in practice.
Exactly. Like instead of just reading a grammar book,
Yeah.
you should go hang out with fluent speakers and kind of pick up the language by osmosis.
I like that approach.
And for scientists, those fluent speakers are the successful solutions from the past.
Okay.
These exemplars, they provide a framework for scientists,
Yeah.
highlighting what's important in a problem and suggesting how to approach it.
Based on what's worked before.
Right.
So a paradigm is like a mental shortcut, helping scientists see connections between what might seem like very different problems
That's a good way to think about it.
and apply solutions that have worked in the past.
Exactly. But what happens when those past solutions stop working?
Oh.
What happens when scientists encounter something that they totally did not expect?
That sounds interesting.
That's where things get really interesting because that's where the potential for a scientific revolution starts.
I see.
And it often begins with what Kuhn calls anomalies.
Let me guess. Anomalies are like those puzzle pieces that just don't fit no matter how hard you try to jam them in.
You got it.
Okay, cool.
Anomalies are those observations or experimental results that just don't quite fit the predictions of the existing paradigm.
Okay.
They're like the unexpected wrinkles that can either be smoothed out or they can end up tearing the whole fabric apart.
Uh-oh.
But it's important to remember that not every anomaly actually leads to a revolution. Science has a way of absorbing these surprises, incorporating them into the existing framework.
So like sometimes you could just bend the rules of the puzzle a little bit to make that weird piece fit.
Exactly. But certain anomalies, especially the ones that keep popping up, and challenging those really fundamental assumptions, those can throw the whole scientific community into crisis mode.
Okay, can you give me like an example of one of those, oh no, this changes everything kind of anomalies?
Sure. Think about the discovery of X-rays back in 1895.
Okay.
Wilhelm Röntgen stumbles upon this invisible radiation that can pass right through solid objects. And this completely upends what scientists thought they knew about light and electromagnetism.
Whoa. They were probably freaking out a little, right? Like,
Yeah.
what even IS this stuff?
It's a perfect example of how those major breakthroughs often come from things going wrong, not going according to plan.
Right.
These unexpected findings, they force scientists to kind of reassess their most basic assumptions about the world.
Okay.
And that's where revolutions really begin.
That's when things get interesting.
Yeah,
This is where Kuhn's comparison to political revolutions makes a lot of sense.
right?
You have that buildup of tension, this feeling that the old system isn't working anymore, and then bam, a complete upheaval.
Precisely. And just like in a political revolution, a scientific revolution leads to a complete reordering of power and priorities.
Interesting.
It's not just about adding new facts, it's about seeing the world in a fundamentally new way.
It's like suddenly realizing that the image you've been staring at is actually an optical illusion.
Oh, that's a good one.
And once you see that other perspective, you can't unsee it.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Thanks.
And that brings us to another one of Kuhn's kind of mind-bending ideas.
Okay.
Incommensurability.
Incommensurability.
It's a mouthful.
It is.
But it's this idea that different paradigms can be so radically different that it's almost impossible to compare them directly.
So wait, if scientists are working within these totally different frameworks,
Yeah.
different ways of seeing the world, how can they even communicate with each other during these periods of revolution?
That's a question that Kuhn grappled with a lot.
Yeah.
It's not just about different interpretations of the data.
Right.
It's about perceiving the world differently,
Okay.
using different language, even asking different questions.
So those scientists were basically speaking totally different languages.
Yeah.
And there's no Rosetta Stone to help them translate. So
Like,
how do they even begin to bridge that gap?
well, it's a messy and challenging process.
I bet.
Kuhn suggested that it involves a lot of painstaking translation, trying to find common ground and map the concepts of one paradigm onto another.
It sounds a bit like those historical linguists who are trying to decipher ancient languages.
yes.
Like piecing together the meaning bit by bit, making educated guesses, hoping they're not getting it totally wrong.
Exactly. And there's always that risk of misinterpretations and misunderstandings.
For sure.
Plus, you have to remember the human element.
Right. These are people we're talking about.
Yeah, imagine building your whole career on one way of seeing the world
Yeah.
and then being told, nope, it's all wrong.
Ouch.
I can see how some scientists might be a little resistant to change, to say the least.
Yeah, it would be too, probably.
Yeah,
Wouldn't that make these scientific revolutions even more chaotic and drawn out?
absolutely. Kuhn argued that resistance is a natural part of the process.
That makes sense.
I mean, those old paradigms were successful for a reason.
Right.
People had invested a lot in them.
Yeah. But if everyone just clung to their old ideas, wouldn't that stifle progress altogether?
That's a good point.
Doesn't science need those rebellious spirits, those people who are willing to, shake things up?
Of course we need those revolutionaries,
Right.
but we also need the guardians of tradition,
Okay.
the ones who make sure that those new ideas are actually worthwhile and rigorously tested.
So we need both.
It's that kind of dynamic tension between tradition and innovation that keeps science moving forward.
So it's not a smooth, linear progression, but more like a dance,
Yeah.
Sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Exactly.
This whole conversation is making me think about scientific progress in a totally new light. It's not just about adding facts. It's about fundamentally changing how we see the world.
That's exactly it. And one of the most radical implications of Kuhn's theory is that even the data itself can change after a scientific revolution.
Wait, the data itself changes. How is that even possible?
It's not that the raw observations change,
Go on.
but how scientists perceive those observations and categorize them what they see as significant.
Okay.
That shifts dramatically.
So it's not just about changing the lens on a camera. It's like the camera itself is different,
Exactly.
capturing a different reality.
Think about the discovery of Uranus.
Okay.
For centuries, astronomers had been observing this celestial object,
Yeah.
but they categorized it as a star because it didn't fit their existing idea of what a planet was.
Right. They didn't have all the information yet.
Then along comes William Herschel with a more powerful telescope,
Okay.
and he notices something odd about its movement, and boom, a whole new planet enters the picture.
That's pretty cool.
That's a perfect example of how changing paradigms can lead to Scientists literally seeing different things.
Even when they're looking at the same data.
Right. Suddenly, those astronomers were primed to recognize other celestial objects that didn't fit the old mold.
I see.
And that led to the discovery of numerous asteroids.
Wow. So in a very real sense, those astronomers were now living in a different world, a world with more planets,
That's right.
a greater awareness of like the vastness and complexity of the universe.
Precisely. And that's the power of those scientific revolutions.
Yeah.
They don't just change our understanding of specific phenomena.
Right.
They transform our entire worldview, how we perceive reality itself.
This is all incredibly fascinating,
I think so too.
but also pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah,
Kuhn has given us a lot to think about here.
he has.
We've covered how scientific knowledge actually changes through these revolutions,
Right.
but he also raises a lot of questions about the nature of truth, objectivity, progress, and science.
Absolutely.
Like, what do we do with all of this?
That's what makes his work so enduringly relevant.
Yeah.
It's not just a history lesson.
Right.
It's a challenge to think critically about the foundations of scientific knowledge.
So where do we go from here? How do we reconcile Kuhn's ideas with our understanding of science as this quest for objective truth?
That's the million-dollar question.
It really is.
And it's one that we're going to tackle head-on in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll explore the implications of his theory for how we think about the nature of his scientific progress.
Right.
And the role of the scientific community in shaping our understanding of the world.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Yeah, glad to be wrapping up this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by like what all of this means,
Right.
especially for this idea of progress and science.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if, as Kuhn argues, different paradigms are so fundamentally different, even incommensurable,
Right.
can we really say that science is moving towards some like ultimate truth?
Yeah.
Or is it more like we're wandering through a forest and each path leads to a different destination?
That's a great question, and it's one that Kuhn really struggled with.
Yes.
He rejected that traditional view of science,
Right, like this steady march towards a single truth.
Exactly, that kind of building on the shoulders of giants idea.
Right, everybody's heard that one.
Instead, Kuhn saw scientific progress more like a branching tree,
Okay, a branching tree.
with different paradigms representing those different branches.
Okay, each exploring the world in its own unique way,
Yeah.
with its own tools and assumptions.
Right, but that doesn't mean there's no progress at all.
I was just thinking that just because there's not like one correct path doesn't mean that some paths aren't more useful than others.
Exactly. Kuhn argued that new paradigms are often more powerful than the ones they replace.
Okay.
Not necessarily truer, but more powerful in their ability to solve problems,
Right.
explain phenomena, make accurate predictions.
So it's not about getting closer to like some final answer,
Mm-hmm.
but about developing these more sophisticated and nuanced ways of understanding the world.
Precisely take the shift from Newtonian mechanics to Einstein's theory of relativity, for example.
Oh yeah, everybody learns Newton's laws in school. These seem pretty fundamental.
They are, but Einstein showed that they're only a special case.
Oh?
They work perfectly well under certain conditions, but they're incomplete when you start dealing with the very large or the very fast.
Interesting. So they're not wrong. They're just not the whole picture.
And Einstein's theory provided a more comprehensive framework.
Okay.
It explained a wider range of phenomena.
From the bending of starlight
Yes.
to the existence of black holes
Exactly. And it opened up these whole new avenues of research
that weren't even conceivable before.
within that Newtonian paradigm.
Wow. So progress in science isn't about reaching some ultimate destination,
Right.
but it's about finding better maps, more powerful tools to help us navigate the complexity of the universe.
I really like that that's a fantastic way to put it.
Thank
But that raises another question.
Okay.
If these different paradigms are so hard to compare,
Yeah.
how do we even judge which one is better?
Right. It can't just be like a popularity contest.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Kuhn argued that choosing a new paradigm isn't a purely logical or objective process.
Oh, interesting.
It's influenced by the evidence, of course,
Right.
but also by the social and historical context.
So like the same set of facts could be interpreted differently depending on the like prevailing worldview,
Yeah.
The
Sad.
assumptions of the time.
Scientists are human beings.
Of course.
They're shaped by their training, their experiences, the communities they belong to.
Right. They don't just like leave all their personal baggage at the lab door.
Exactly. And Kuhn didn't see that as a weakness.
Oh,
He saw it as a strength.
okay.
This social dimension of science,
Right.
it allows for a diversity of perspectives,
Which can lead to.
which can lead to more creative solutions.
So the scientific community acts as a kind of filter, debating, testing, challenging new paradigms
Yeah.
to see which ones are truly worthy of adoption.
It's a really rigorous process, like a survival of the fittest for scientific theories.
Oh, I like that only the strongest ideas survive.
Exactly. And it's that process of debate and testing
Yeah.
that drives progress, ensuring that the most powerful and fruitful ideas kind of rise to the top.
This whole deep dive has really changed how I think about science.
Mm.
It's not just about like memorizing facts from a textbook.
Yeah.
It's this ongoing dynamic process of revolution and evolution.
It's a human endeavor.
Yeah.
It's messy and complex, but also incredibly creative and powerful.
Kuhn's book has really given me a whole new appreciation for the ingenuity and resilience of the scientific community
Yeah.
and the profound impact that scientific change here had on our understanding of the world.
It's pretty amazing.
So what stands out most to you from our deep dive into scientific change?
You know, I think what struck me the most is that science isn't this static, objective pursuit of some ultimate truth. It's this dynamic, evolving process shaped by the very human beings who are engaging in it.
And those human beings are constantly questioning, challenging, and revising their understanding of the world,
Yeah,
driven by this just insatiable curiosity to make sense of it all.
it's pretty inspiring.
And Kuhn leaves us with a final provocative thought.
Oh, yeah.
He asks, what must the world be like for science to be possible at all?
It really makes you think.
It really does. It suggests that the very nature of the universe and our place in it might be like intricately intertwined with our ability to understand it.
It's a pretty deep question.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into scientific revolutions. We'll be back soon to explore another fascinating topic and challenge your assumptions about the world around us.